Hey everyone, welcome to a fresh episode of Show Me the Crypto. This week we chat with Ishan Bhaidani, and Ishan had this crazy tweet prediction going back to October 5th, 2022, where he essentially said, something's going on with FTX. I am shorting the FTT token because here's some fishy things that are happening. And then he broke down about 12 different things that were on his radar. So now, given the fact that the SBF trial is happening in real time, we thought it'd be a perfect time to bring Ishan on the pod, chat about that. Ulf, what were some of your takeaways?
Well, the timing couldn't be better to have someone on who made this bold prediction prior to FTX's collapse, watched everything fall apart there shortly after, got a lot of notoriety for it, and props to him. And now here we are a year later, the trial's happening. It was great to have someone on with that sort of insider perspective who clearly, had insights going that far back. But even to this day, he said he's very closely following the trial. It's super interesting to him. So we get into everything happening regarding the trial. We also just get into, honestly, he's got an interesting backstory. So diving into Ishan's backstory and learning about how he got into crypto and really tying everything back to predictions a lot in this episode. He got into sports betting. That's kind of one of the ways that he was introduced to crypto, very prediction centric there, and then getting into his FTX prediction and making some other bold predictions by the end of the episode. I think there was a lot of great content. It was a good show, and I think everyone's going to enjoy it.
Now, we're recording this on Tuesday, October 10th. And the reason I tell you that is because we know crypto moves fast, and the SBF trial, by the time you're watching this, may have all sorts of new crazy headlines that have happened. So this is kind of as of the recording day, Caroline Ellison had taken the stance. So we talk a little bit about that as well. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto! Show me the crypto!
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Ishan Bhaidani, Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of Web3 marketing agency Scrib3. A year ago, long before most had concerns about Sam Bankman-Fried, Ishan tweeted, "I'm taking all of my capital out of FTX and I'm going to short FTT token." Now, with the SBF trial underway, we figured the timing was perfect to chat with the guy who called the chaos early. Ishan, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Excited to dive in.
Yeah. So let's dive. Well, we're going to talk about all things FTX in a moment, but before we go there, can you break down a little bit with regard to your career background and at what point did you discover the crypto space?
Yeah. So I have a pretty fun story. I'll try not to drag it along too long and save you guys a lot of the details. But
we want the
give us this is a long form podcast, man. Jump in.
Yeah, let's do it. So my background is in private equity. I had my own PE fund after college, dabbled in a couple different industries, but, had my own PE fund. Wasn't anything too crazy, like low 8 figures. My brother and I ran it, kind of like a family office. And then I had always kind of tangentially been in crypto. So my actual true crypto origin story was actually through sports betting, funny enough. So I had a professor, I have a finance background, I have a finance degree, and I took a statistics class in college. And our professor would show us different, we were learning a lot about R and, R Studio and R Commander, and R is like an open source statistics software, basically. And so we were learning a ton, and a lot of the data sets that he would use just happened to be sports related. I've always been kind of a sports fan, growing up, played everything, watched everything, all that. So he would show us all these like crazy modeling that he would do for like regular projects we would do in class around sports data. And so I pulled him aside one day and I was like, hey, have you ever thought about like using this info for like predictive analysis, right? Which is essentially my like sly way of saying like, have you ever thought about using this to like bet on games, right? And so he was like, well, I don't really, he was like a very, he had like an APAC background. He's from Asia, definitely not English as a first language. And so he was like, I know a lot about stats, but I don't know a lot about sports, American sports, and about like gambling and stuff like that. And I was like, well, look at this. Like, I know a lot about sports and about, get gambling, but I don't know a ton about stats. So we started working together and we started betting on sports using predictive analysis. So like one of the fun things I like to say is like, if I were to ask you what the biggest predictor of college football winning, because I went to University of Texas, right? So big football school. So if I were to ask you what was the biggest predictor of a college football win, you'd probably say like points scored or like defensive ranking or, some kind of crazy analytic stat. It's actually a coach's salary for a long time. That was the biggest predictor of a team's ability to win a game. And so we would find these like weird statistics and then use that to create models that would give us an edge. And so we would go with a couple of, I can save you guys kind of the nitty gritty details, but we started doing really well. And once we started doing really well, some of the only places that we could place like large action, like take large bets, was on online books like Bovada and some of these offshore books. And this is about 2017. So I was probably a junior in college. And this is when Bovada was one of the first online books to start taking Bitcoin. And they would do in and outs and transactions in Bitcoin. And so there was a time, I have like this very specific memory in college where we were doing really well with sports betting. And then we were taking the money out in Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin was also going up like crazy at this time because this is like 2017 bull market, right? So it was like end of 2017. This is like my fall semester of my junior year. And not only am I like, we were at one point making like $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And on top of that, and this is as like a junior in college. And on top of that, Bitcoin was going up. So I remember there was one month where I did the numbers and I made like $30,000. And I was like, holy shit, what is going on here? Right. And I was like, what is this Bitcoin stuff? But then I also like wrote it up and I rolled it all the way down. Right. I sold a little bit like on local Bitcoins and stuff, had like some like sketchy cash transactions selling Bitcoin. But I still held a lot of it. I wrote it all the way up and I wrote it all the way down, just like I guess a lot of people did in 17. So I was always kind of tangentially watching the space from there. But around 2019, I had some friends of mine show me the early blue chip DeFi stuff, right? So I like Bitcoin is cool, right? But like Bitcoin, I mean, maybe some Bitcoin maxes are going to watch this and hate me, but like Bitcoin's like a little bit of pet rock, right? Like it's cool. It does its thing, but like it just does this one thing, which is awesome, right? And it's like definitely a massive innovation, like not only like technologically, but like human, culturally, all of that. Like, I'm all for it, right? But it's a little bit of a pet rock, right? It just does this one thing, which is kind of boring. And I was never like too interested in like the ins and outs of it. But I had some friends show me the early blue chip DeFi stuff like Maker, Aave, and Compound. And I have this really explicit memory of me seeing Compound for the first time. And it just like, I didn't even have to look into like Ethereum and the smart contracts and everything. I just saw the outlay and like the UI of like, okay, well, this is the utilization rate. And then this is like the interest rate for borrowing against, your collateral. And it just hit me. And then I still had the term money market. And I was like, oh, it just all clicked for me. Cause I just have like this entrepreneurial background. I guess if you want to go even further back, like I kind of grew up in like the back of a gas station. Like my family was in like the gas station convenience store business. I've been working in those since I was like 6 years old. I would like go to accounting meetings with my parents at like 10 and like translate and explain to them like what was happening, what this accountant was saying. So I just have like this long entrepreneurial background. And then I saw this money market and I was like, oh shit. So I told my brother, I was like, hey, like you have to like take this over. Like this is just an itch I need to scratch and I need to learn everything about this thing. And then I found DeFi and that was like my calling into the space. And I've always been, since then, I've just been a DeFi maxi. And yeah, that was just, I found Maker and Aave and Compound. And I was like, I have to get obsessed. And I got obsessed and I have to learn everything about this stuff. Then I started learning about Ethereum and smart contracts and further into DeFi and DEXs and all of that. And then, it was just a pretty long wind. But then I started to spend all day and night in the industry, then started to work in the industry, on and on.
I want to go back to the sports betting because you kind of just moved on from that. But at Whip, you were talking about two different ways you were making lots of money at the time, or lots of crypto, Bitcoin and prices going up, and obviously you ride the crash down. that would have crushed all your crypto value. But what about the sports betting? Because that was still going good, it sounded like.
Yeah, it was. There was a time where it was going well until like this with what happens in the market is that they start to pick up on your edges, right? And then your edges get arbed out. And I'm a probably 21-year-old kid who's like doing super well, and I'm telling everybody in the world that I'm doing super well.
Yeah.
And so in the professional, I guess like pro sports betting industry is like not super massive. So then people started to find out what we were doing. Like we started sharing our models with people, and then people started taking our models, and then over time you lose your edge, right? And so then you lost your edge. I made all this money, lost it in Bitcoin. And so then over time we just kind of like we tried to find a new model, tried to tweak it, couldn't find anything that worked, and then we just kind of like it just kind of died out a little bit. So, and that just tends to happen with sports betting is like as soon as you have an edge, like Harlabob, he's like pretty famous in the sports betting world, also very well known in the crypto world. Same thing. He talks about this all the time. When people start to hear about it, the market starts to act as the market does, which is do what the market does, which is make things more efficient. And so then over time became more and more efficient. People found out about our college coach's salary. I'm sure there were some people that started inputting it into their models in the book level, right? Whether you're like Vegas or you're the offshore books. So I assume that eventually people started to catch on, and then they started adding it to the model. So it just wasn't super efficient anymore. And so then like I've played with a lot of other things over time, but never found something that got us winning as high of a percentage as we were then. I mean, on average, if you bet on sports, you want to hit 52.3% of your wins is like the golden number. You just need to hit 52.3, and anything above that, you're making money. As long as you maintain, like you're not, doing huge spreads, right? You're like minus 110, which is like about industry average. But like there was a time where we were winning like 65, 67%, 70% of our games some months. And so, like that's like an unheard of amount. Like if you tell any pro that you're winning like 65% of your games, they're like, what? Like, which referee do you have on the book or something like that, right? So, that's I guess eventually gets arbed out, like all things do.
Why do you think the coach salary was such a big factor? And was there any other like anomaly factors that you came across other than that one?
Yeah, I mean, there was like a lot of your basic stuff, right? Like, rushing yardage, number of like average star rating of a player on your offensive line was a big one, right? So if you had like a team of offensive linemen that were all like, on average 4.5 stars, so a bunch of 5 and 4 star recruits, which means that they were like really great recruits. That was a really big one because like games are usually won in the trenches. In basketball, we played with a little bit of the stuff around referees. That's a really big one, right? Average number of fouls a referee calls, and that correlates to over-unders, right? So if you have a ref that calls a lot of fouls, that's really tight with the whistle. More fouls means slow, like more game stoppage, more free throws, which makes it easier to score points, and so that leads to higher like projected wins. So like there's a couple things like that, but like nothing super substantial outside of coach's salary. I think that was really big just because it's often overlooked, right? It's not like you're not going into the game thinking, oh, this coach is getting paid higher than this coach, so this coach is better. It's just kind of like assumed, or it's just a metric that's not super taken into account. But if you think about it, like if you have a coach that's paid more, it's probably a better coach. So if you go into a game and you have a well-respected coach and a new coach, and the well-respected coach gets paid a lot more, but maybe they had a couple hard games that they lost at the beginning of the season, that can skew the lines. And so that creates value. So it's all just about like, where can you find that chunk of value?
So let's jump back now to where you were going with discovering crypto and then getting into DeFi. After that, at some point here, you started Scrib, a Web3 marketing studio. So can you tell us a little bit about Scrib and what led to co-founding that?
Yeah. So, after I was into the space for a while, and, I had kind of gone through the space, and I had went through 2020, and, what is now known as like DeFi summer. Like this was when I was like full on spending 16 hours a day, just like sitting on Discord doing like, weird DeFi stuff. And I walked into DeFi summer. I still had no idea what I was doing, but I ended up doing really well for myself. And so then after that, I was like, okay, well, like if you really like, is this an actual industry, right? Or is this just like a bunch of Ponzi's, right? Because this was like peak Ponzi season, right? And so it's like, okay, like there are some stuff here that's legit, but is there enough here to make a career out of it? And I've always thought about my like working career like seasons, kind of like a basketball player, except like not like every year is one season, but like you can have like 5 years that make up a season, right? And so I was always like very into like, okay, well, like what am I gonna do the next season of my career? And so I was like, okay, well, like is this crypto thing viable for a season of my career? So I was like, the only way to find out is if you work in the industry, right? And so I started working at another agency, worked there for like a year and a half. And, I have a lot of love and respect for those guys. Just kind of found that I just had some fundamental differences about how that business should be run, one. And then two, actually like what makes up good go-to-market in crypto, right? And like what is actually needed. So we started Scrib in November of 22. We kind of soft started the business in like June of 22, like right after Luna. And then like we got really serious, like me and my co-founders, we quit our jobs and like really got serious about it around November of 22. And the thesis was pretty simple, right? We just looked at the agency landscape in the space and came to this realization that crypto needed like a really crypto native degen, really understand the culture and the landscape agency that helped with go-to-market, right? Every project needs to go to market. There's plenty of projects out there that build incredible stuff, especially in DeFi and infrastructure. Like those two areas specifically, there's a lot of incredible innovation there. But what we found is that there's a lot of these teams that are, maybe it's 8 to 15 guys. People, I don't want to assume guys, but I would say 90% men. And usually it's about 85% developers that are on these teams, right? So it'll be a team of 15 people, 90% of which, let's say like 13 of which are developers, and they'll go out and they'll raise something between 10 and $20 million. And they'll be like, hey, we built something awesome. Like we have this incredible piece of infrastructure or, this new DeFi primitive we've built. We've raised a bunch of money. What do we do now? Right. And that's the question that I got a lot. It's like, okay, what's next? What do we do? And so then we kind of came to this realization that a lot of these teams needed groups that understood the business component and understood the go-to-market component. And so if we built a team that could do those two things really well, which understood structure, hiring, like all of the traditional businesses, CFO as a service, all these like traditional things that you needed, plus really understood how to take projects to market, right? How do you find discoverability? How do you build funnels? How do you actually like have people use your project, convince them that it's worth using? What does it mean for a user? Like what does a user think when they're learning about a protocol, or how do you convince a user to try a protocol or a project? And especially with the level of risk that a user takes on when depositing into a protocol, how do you convince them that it's worth it, or it's interesting, or it might be worth the risk of the capital, right? And so these questions, I never really found anyone that was doing a really great job answering this. So it was like kind of like this white space in the market that we saw, and kind of realized that if no one else is going to do it, like we're probably set to do it really well.
What are some of your top clients or success stories since you started the business?
Yeah. I mean, like we probably, just to give you an idea, we started the business in November of 22. It was 3 of us. We were 3 people from November to February of 23. And then let's say from February to now, so let's call it 8 months, February to October, we're at about 41 to 42 heads.
Wow.
And yeah, like, and we think it's just a testament
Somebody's
to like
had a full-time job hiring.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Like I spend an incredible amount of time hiring. Like it's because like it's really about finding the best talent, right? And the best talent to serve the best projects, right? So we probably work with like a dozen projects in the top 200. I mean, and all around DeFi and infrastructure, we work with the Uniswap Foundation. We work with Monad. A big fan of them, all EVM scaling, Alt-L1, that I think is like, incredibly bullish. Like they're just like bringing pipelining and parallelization to the EVM, which I think is like going to help probably the EVM compete with like the Solanas of the world and, maybe the Aptos and Suis. We also work with, Axelar, Evmos. We do a ton of work in the Cosmos ecosystem. Let's see, Gains Network. They're one of our first clients, big DeFi derivative protocol. So essentially we exclusively work on DeFi and infrastructure. And that's really all we want to focus on. Like what I like to say is like, I like losing money on JPEGs as much as the next guy, right? But like, is that what the industry needs, right? And is that what I want to do? So we've kind of found this like nice little ikigai of like, what are we good at? Well, like definitely the more technical stuff, right? There's a lot of people that can do the consumer applications and stuff. And like Friendtech's really cool and important, but like Friendtech doesn't need help, right? That sells itself, right? What needs help? And so it's like what we're good at, what is needed and what do we want to do, right? It's like, I really only wanted to work on DeFi infrastructure. So the idea was kind of building this entire infrastructure around doing what I wanted to do, which is helping these like long tail projects that are way too technical for the average person, understanding them, and then being able to kind of Eli 5 it for the general public, work on their user journey, right? How are people finding about the protocol? How are people learning about what the next stages are? Or, how are you going to find that next incremental user? And how are you going to convince them that your application is worth using? And so that's kind of what we focus on.
Cool. And you were also an angel investor in Polygon. Now, what gave you the conviction to invest early in that project?
Yeah. I love angel investing, right? It's one of those things where, I'm probably not great at it, but, I've had a couple wins, so it makes me look good. But, I love meeting founders, right? I love meeting people that want to take on hard problems. And that's probably why I love what I do so much, is like, I spend all day just meeting different projects and different founders who are building cool things that need help, right? And I mean, Polygon was one of those things that the vision was always there, right? It was like, we're going to build out this Ethereum scaling solution and we're going to continue to iterate on it until we have the best scaling solution. It was never, we're going to build this piece of infrastructure and then we're good, we're done. Like, let's wrap it up. Like, we made our money. It was always, we're going to take this, like, anybody will tell you the sidechain, the proof of stake sidechain is not great tech, right? Like, it's just objectively not super great. It's very centralized. They have a ton of reorg problems. Like, the proof of stake chain is not great, but what they did was they were the first to market, right? Which I think was really important. They built a really great brand. They always had awesome business development. And then they had this vision that where the puck is going, we're going to build there. And that's what they've done really well with ZK EVM, right? Which is what gave me such conviction, is they always had this larger vision. So, and it's definitely a little bit of like, I come from an Indian background. My family's from India. Polygon was based out of India for a long time, and a lot of the team is from there as well. So there was just a little bit of like an easy connection there. But it was always the vision of, we're going to build something that's going to go to market before anybody. And then we're going to take everything that we earn from that, and we're going to build the best tech that there is. And I think you can talk to any layer 2 team in the space. You can talk to Scroll, you can talk to Arbitrum, Optimism. Everybody will tell you the ZK EVM architecture is incredibly impressive. And it's like legitimately a technological feat of what they've built. And so that was always the vision from the start, is let's get something up. Let's help Ethereum scale. Let's help Ethereum grow to what it can be. Now it's in a better spot. Now let's build to where the puck is going, which is always been ZK, right? ZK has always been that thing that everyone has had their eye on. It's always been this like kind of Easter egg opportunity of, if you can really nail ZK scaling, then that's like, optimistic rollups are cool. Like, ZK is going to kill it every time, right? And so I think having first mover plus the vision to shoot where the puck is going is what really gave me a lot of conviction that, okay, well, they're going to dominate, they're going to gain market share, but they're not going to sit on that market share and let it dwindle away. They're going to build into what's actually happening in the larger picture, which is building the best tech. So let's hit a single, and then the next time they come around the bag, let's go for the home run. It's kind of how I think about it.
So we've talked a little bit about your background, Ishan, and some impressive things, right? Growing Scrib to where it's at right now, angel investing in Polygon. But I read somewhere that the thing that's at the top of your resume was the prediction tweet that came in early October. So just before Scrib launched there. And that had to do with the whole suspicion or suspicious feelings you had about FTX. So we're going to talk about the Twitter thread in a second, but before that, at what point was this on your radar? Because I would imagine before you actually put this detailed tweet out there, probably weeks or months before, there were things that were hitting your radar. So when did your suspicions around FTX originate?
So I had this really explicit memory of, so in, I want to say it's like May or June of 22, Sam Trabucco left Alameda Research, right? He was co-CEO with Caroline Ellison, and he had left in May of June of 2022. Definitely felt weird at the time. Like, you're at the top of the world, you run the industry, you run the biggest, most awesome hedge fund in the world that's solved all of these incredible things like the kimchi trade and all of these things that are like folk tales, right? Like, oh man, they solved the kimchi trade. Like, these guys got to be minting money, and it just seems suspicious, right? Like, why, if you're on the top of the world right now, why are you leaving? But I think there's a pretty obvious like face value reason, which is that he probably became post-economic, right? Like they probably made so much money. He probably bought a boat and was like, what's the point of working anymore? Which totally makes sense, right? But the one that really perked my ears was I want to say it was like September of 22. Brett Harrison left, and Brett Harrison was the CEO of FTX US, right? And this guy was supposed to be like this very adult in the room figure. I mean, he had been there for less than a year, and like if you know anything about like tech and startups, like you know that anyone that gets a position like that typically gets a vest, right? You don't just get that equity straight away. You get that equity, usually there's a 1-year cliff, and then you have like some kind of linear vesting schedule where, every month you start to get more and more equity until you kind of earn all of your equity over like maybe a 3-4, with a company like this, probably like a 5 or 6 year span, right? So if you really are at the top of the world, you're running this massive exchange that's dominating the US. I mean, you have like, Super Bowl ads with the Curb Your Enthusiasm guy, right? Like, you have like Shaq on your cap table and Tom Brady, and you're like running the world, and you have you have equity in a $32 billion business. Why would you leave like right before your vest cliff, right? Like you're right about to hit your cliff. That's like when you're going to get a majority, at least the biggest lump sum you're going to get, right? Because you have all this year's worth of work, and you leave right before. That's when I was like, there is definitely something going on. And I remember talking to the guys on Zoom, and I was like, there's something going on here. I can feel it in my bones. Like something's not right, because this doesn't make any sense. Why are both of these guys, who are like probably your right and left-hand man, like, why are they leaving, right? And so that's when I got the impetus to like start to dig in. And I was like, man, like, let's start to look into like their volume, like how much revenue can these guys be doing? I mean, it's always opaque because it's a private business, which is why, like, another reason why you should be so bullish on like, on chain, right? Like, and on chain being the new online and all that. Like, you don't need proof of reserves. Everything's on chain, right? Well, with these guys, like everything is totally opaque. You don't know what the revenue is. You don't even know what the real volume is on these exchanges, because there's so much wash trading and, market making and all of that, where you don't even really get an understanding of how much volume they're doing. And if you can't figure out volume, it's very hard to understand revenue, right? Because revenue and volume are directly correlated with exchanges. So yeah, I guess that's where like the first inkling came, was like Brett Harrison leaving. I was like, this does not smell right.
So Ishan, you talked there a little bit about some of the early indicators, that things about key execs leaving, as well as you touched a little bit on the volume, but your actual Twitter thread, it focused on 12 different things. So I'm wondering, can you dive into this a little bit deeper, just in terms of when you started peeling back the layers, what did you discover around FTX?
Yeah, definitely. So, first thing that was pretty easy for me to understand was like the volume, right? So with derivative exchange, with any kind of exchange, volume is direct revenue generation, right? You typically take a trading fee. Now, one of our first clients, when we were even still like pre-starting Scrib, was Gains Network, right? And Gains Network was and still is probably the second biggest, probably third biggest derivative DEX. So it's a very large derivative trading protocol. You can trade everything from your crypto assets to stocks, commodities, everything on chain. They use like a synthetic liquidity pool, right? So you have a liquidity pool that backs any trade. So it's kind of like the example I like to give is almost like trading against the house, right? So like you just have a house, and if you win, you get money out of the house. If you lose, you put money into the house, right? So we've been core contributors at Gains for like, I don't know, it's been like probably 18, 19 months now. And so I have a really intimate understanding of the protocol and the business and how it operates and works. And so like being a core contributor there, I keep a really close eye on volume. And I started to notice around this time that decentralized derivative volume, on DYTX, GMX, Gains was going up, but the FTX volume and even other exchanges were going down. FTX was like almost as low as, like December 2020 levels. Like you're talking about like pre-bull market almost. I guess like post DeFi summer, pre like super bull market, right? We got like super bully into all of 2021, right? And then we hit like the Pico top at like November of 21. So like you had volume going low, but all the money that they were spending was like hot, as high as possible, right? And this is when you started to hear about all the frivolous spending, right? You started to hear about, Joe Biden campaign donations. You started to hear about FTX Arena and all these different sponsorships they were doing. And I mean, there was a couple other pieces. I mean, I'm just trying to remind myself at this point. Like there was like FTX NFTs, FTX stocks, like both just like really poorly done activations. There was stories about Sam Trabucco like buying a boat, right? There was the venture fund, which was just like I mean, like doing like the craziest, biggest rounds, right? Like they bought 30%. I mean, they didn't buy, they invested, they were 30% of the LP in Anthony Scaramucci's like Skybridge Capital Fund, right? They did like all these massive Series Bs. Like they did the Doodle Series A, which was like, I think they raised like, 40 or 50 million or something like that. Like it's just like some of the craziest investments I've ever seen. And it's like, and now it's crazy. It's all starting to come out that like they were rehypothecating the money to do these investments. And now it's like, it's starting to make a lot more sense. But just like the way that they were throwing the money around, the product wasn't really getting any better. And then their volume and their main stuff was going down. And then you also start to look at like their projects, right? You had like Maps and Oxy and Serum and Radium. And like, if you look at any of those charts, it was down only, right? So like the only thing that was going up only was FTT, which was, I mean, pretty crazy. I mean, they went from like pennies to like $50 at one point, but now you find out that it was all just like, they were just holding the supply, borrowing against it. Of course, there's going to be no float and you're just going to like, put it up as collateral and borrow all these dollars against it. Yeah, of course your number is going to go up because no one's selling because it's not actually in the market, So you put all of these factors together, but mostly around like their revenue is definitely going down and their expenses were like unbelievable, that it was just one of these like 1 + 1 isn't equaling 2 and this just isn't making sense. I think that's like the general theme, I'd say.
So you make this prediction, you put out this Twitter thread, and shortly after everything collapses like crazy. How surprised were you when that happened? I mean, obviously you had predicted a lot of this, but was it a surprise just how fast everything unraveled, or was this all things that you continued to feel more and more was sort of like, coming down the line?
Yeah, it's funny when I put it out, like I got shit on like pretty badly. Like I had random people coming to me, hopping in my DMs, telling me I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about. I have this one of my friends is in Friends with Benefits, which is like the big DAO backed by A16Z, and he would like support me when I was like starting to like put out threads and stuff on Twitter, and he would put in some of my tweets in there. And there's like this screenshot he sent me of like him putting this tweet in there, and then this guy being like, "What is this guy smoking? Like, is this guy crazy? Like these guys have more money than God." And I mean, I'd like to say that I knew it was coming, but I don't think anyone, like even I had some pretty strong conviction. I put my name on there, I put my name on the line for it, but I don't think anyone really knew it was this bad. And the way that it came and crumbled so quickly when everybody thought they were totally bulletproof, like even I, who is probably as far out on the spectrum of there's something shady going on here, like I don't think anyone was as far out on the spectrum. I mean, a couple of guys were like calling them out, but nothing like, hey, there's something super shady going on here. No one else was that far. And even I was like, holy shit, what is going on here, right? Like, it's just, like who could have thought that there's like, you have a $32 billion business, you have like 20 billion in assets, and like you have like an $8 billion hole, right? Like 40% of everybody's money is just poof gone. Like, I don't think anybody could have predicted it was this bad. But I think looking back on it now and thinking about it, I think it's just more and more obvious that like, how did no one else see this coming, right? Like it just like the numbers never added up, and it just, in hindsight, it seems a lot more obvious now. But yeah, in the moment, I don't think anyone actually thought it was this bad.
So then all of that in early November comes to light. What was the vindication like at that point in time? Because, some people shitting on you while you put out that tweet a month later. I mean, you called it. What was that like? Like, were you getting a ton of media requests? What was the experience like from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll be honest, man. It was awesome. Like, like overnight,
profit.
Overnight, I like 10x my Twitter following, which was definitely super vindicating. I mean, that's like I set out to kind of do this, and I really wanted to like start threading and start putting my content and my thoughts out there more. And then like within like maybe 2 months of me doing this consistently, like I get all of this vindication, right? And all this like, and it was cool. Like, some of my idols like are reaching out to me, like people that I had a ton of respect for, founders of projects that I loved, definitely got a lot of media opportunities. I mean, started doing the podcast circuits, meeting with, all the, I guess big podcasters in the space. So, I mean, yeah, it was definitely super cool. And then the coolest thing was that, and people always like the question everyone always asks is like, how much money did you make on the FTT short? And like, yeah, I did really well, right? Like I multiplied my net worth, right? But I think the coolest thing was that it lined up so perfectly with like us starting Scrib, like I think like we officially incorporated the business on November 1, right? And we quit our jobs and we're all in. And then 6 days later, this happens. And then so the making the money on like the FTT short was cool and all, but the cooler part was it really helped catapult the business. And now I have like this sustainable living, breathing organism that I can point to and said like, wow, like calling this out, like it wasn't just like, oh, I traded and made a bunch of money. Like it helped me build this like, I think of a business as like a child, right? It's like, it helped me grow this child that like, I mean, Scrib is probably at the point now where I could take a step back and I could be like, okay, well, like, I don't want to be in the day-to-day anymore. Like, and it will still run and live and breathe and be fine. And I think that's kind of the coolest thing that came out of it was like, I hope this business came out of the ground as a result. So.
One of the reasons we wanted to have you on as well, Ishan, I mentioned this in the bio, but it is the timeliness, right? So a year later now, the SBF trial is underway. We're currently in the second week. As of today, which is as of recording, Tuesday, October 10th, Caroline Ellison took the stand as the star witness. How close have you been following this trial? And kind of what are your thoughts so far early in the process?
Yeah. I have so many thoughts. It's like, I don't even know how to like organize them properly. But yes, I have been following very closely. Like I consume every bit of content I can out of it. It sucks that there's no cameras in the courtroom or anything like that. So I just like a couple people that I think are doing great coverage. I think the Blockworks guys are doing great coverage. I mean, I'm big fans of Jason and those guys. We have a great relationship with them, but I think like Molly, Molly Jane Zuckerman. There's another girl that's doing really great coverage of it. I think like Tiffany Fong is doing really great coverage of it. The overpriced JPEG girl, Carly.
Yeah,
I think she's doing really great coverage of it. Like, so it kind of feels like a little bit like citizen journalism. Brady Dale's doing good stuff. He's there every day. So I consume every bit I can because I just find it so fascinating. As far as my thoughts, I tend to fall on like, I don't know, I tend to be like an optimist. And I think that's like, you kind of have to be a little bit optimistic to be in crypto of like, we're going to overthrow the banks and DeFi is going to win. And this is the better way to do a financial system and all that. Like, it just kind of lends itself to being an optimist. And like, I just find myself being like, kind of feeling bad for him. Right. Like, I just get this vibe that like, he definitely knew what he was doing, right? Like, let's not mince, like, he definitely knew that he was stealing money. I guess I don't think he was actively trying to defraud people. I think he was just saw a bunch of money lying around, picked it up, used it, thought he was going to put it back, and then everything came tumbling down before, which I think is just a function of the bull market and the bear market and the cyclical nature of the industry that we're in that, when things go up, things can come down twice as fast. I think like this was, I got a little bit of a taste of the cycle in 17, 18 through like my Bitcoin and my losing of all my Bitcoin. But like, I think you start to get a realization that with how cyclical and like crazy this industry is, like you can see a world where, you start to make a bunch of money, you make a couple great business decisions, you feel like you're on top of the world, you feel like you're bulletproof. You have these awesome growing businesses, Alameda and FTX, you're like, an A-list celebrity almost. You go from like this weird kid from MIT to like an A-list celebrity. You're meeting with Giselle Bündchen and Tom Brady and Shaq and like, the who's who. You're going to DC to go like talk on Capitol Hill with Gensler and Biden and all of that. And like, I can see how he just got way in and over his head. But at the same time, he was also like a total criminal and crook and like definitely took a lot of people's money. So like, I can see both sides of it. I am a little bit more partial to like forgiving the guy, like, because like I think there's a lot more like there's a lot of manipulation that happens in this industry just because it's such low liquidity and there's a few really, really big players that are concentrated. So you have like your Binances, you have like your Justin Suns, you have your, Vitalik and the EF kind of crew. Like there's still a lot of constant. I would call it concentration in the industry, right? There's a few massive Bitcoin whales, there's a few massive ETH whales. And with that comes like the opportunity to manipulate, right? You have these massive exchanges that don't have a ton of competition right now. Who's Binance's competition? Like Huobi is like, I still put that at the whole like cartel of like Binance, Justin Sun, like they're all like two peas in the pod over there. Like Coinbase, they're like very by the book, right? But like they're not necessarily competitive with what Binance is doing. So like you have a lot of concentration, and with concentration, I guess brings a lot of risk and manipulation opportunity, or like low liquidity, or highly profitable trade opportunities, however you want to frame it, that people do. And so with that, I think that that leads itself to a lot of volatility, which is definitely a symptom of the industry. And with a lot of volatility comes, like, when you have your high highs and you don't hedge and you don't protect yourself, then you have low lows. And so I think they just had too high of a high and didn't hedge their bets and got too low of a low, and everything blew up. But I don't necessarily think that he sat there and was like, I'm going to steal all these people's money and never give it back to them, and ha ha ha, like I'm this evil genius who's just going to steal people's money. I think he took money when he shouldn't have. I think he thought he was going to put it back. I think he had every intent. I think the intention was to put the money back. And I think that means a lot. But also, like, I didn't have a bunch of money stuck on FTX. So like, I'm not going to sit here, if you're like a victim of this, and like be like, no, SBF is not that bad. Like, yeah, he's a terrible person, right? He stole a bunch of people's money. Was he trying to put it back? Probably. Did he have the intent to steal it? I don't think so. Which is what puts me in this weird like moral conundrum, especially as someone who's like benefited. Like, I'm one of the few people that have benefited massively from his fall. And so maybe that gives me like an extra set of sympathy, possibly, because I'm one of the few people that benefited from this like objectively awful situation. So I just have this like huge moral conundrum, which is why I can't get enough of the trial and everything. Cause like I'm trying to solve this internally, like with my own, I guess, like personal moral beliefs. And it's not really going well.
What do you think about the angle, though, that like I can see where you're coming from, because he was painted from the beginning. Whether you can say he painted himself, whether just by the things he said, he branded himself to be this. What was the term they use? It's like basically an altruistic individual, where they're and they're everything. Part of the way he looked at life was to make money, to do good. And that's, at least from his viewpoint. Obviously, he did a whole bunch of terrible things to individual people en masse. And so you could be like, okay, well, that doesn't, was that all just a ploy and it's not the real him? Or to your point, was that his actual intent? And whether he just overlooked all the damage he was doing in the meantime, hoping it wouldn't cause real damage, because at some point he would put all that money back. Or do you think maybe he, like you said, it got to his head, and maybe to the point where he did develop some level of a God complex? Caroline was on Stan today, and she said that he had, high political ambitions. He said he had a 5% chance of becoming the president of the United States at some point. Was this a man who maybe at some point, even if his original intent was to put the money back after he steals it and makes more with it, or was there just going to be a point of unraveling inevitably? And even let's say the unraveling wasn't even going to happen. Let's say he never got caught. Was he going to get so rich and continue to be power hungry that it still would be a decade, 2 decades down the line, and he's still saying, I'm going to pay it back eventually? Meanwhile, he's the richest person in the world. Like, are you being too nice to say that he was going to put it back? It wasn't just his intent. He was going to do it. Or, what's the other side there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I want to unpack there. So first off, I think all the effective altruism stuff was all bullshit. Like, I think he said it in his messages with Tiffany Fong of like, these are the like woke or the shibboleths that the Westerners say in order to be liked. Like, I think that's his personality. I think it was all just a means to an end. And I think the end was like as much power as possible. I think he's definitely power hungry, money hungry. I think maybe there's a world where he had certain beliefs that he wanted to achieve. I don't think it was totally altruistic of like, I just want to, maybe he did want to make the world a better place, but like, it wasn't solely like, I just want to do the best for the world, that's why I need to make all this money. I think a lot of it was, I want to be so powerful that I can shape the world in the way I want to be, which I think is very different than effective altruism, which is more like I need to make as much money to be as charitable and great for the world as possible, not I need to make as much money because I want to mold the world in the way that I see fit. I think those are two very different things. I think he was more the latter, not the former. And so I think he was more I guess you can call that a form of like egotism or like, you know, something around there, right? So I think it was like egotistical means to an end, right? I think you hit the God complex thing, which I think is really, really important. And we've seen this time and time again in the space. And I think there's something uniquely interesting that happens in the crypto space around this because I don't think this is a phenomenon that the world has really ever seen outside of like your top figures in history, which is when you have a cultural figure that also has a huge monetary benefit behind them. So not only am I going to ride or die for SBF, but if I ride or die for him and he does well, I'm going to make a shit ton of money through the FTT token. So the FTT token is not only a bet on FTX as a business, but it's also a bet on Sam as a person, right? And so that's how and so when you add that component, the monetary component with fanaticism, that's when you get this incredibly interesting mixture that I don't think we've really seen in human history before. And so I think we've seen this like Do Kwon, obviously, right? Like Luna, Tix, whatever you want to call them. Like it was so obviously a Ponzi. If anyone did any time to look into the Luna mechanics, which is why so many people were shouting from the top that this is such an obvious Ponzi, because it was, right? If you're going to buy back and burn and use that to back a stable coin, like it's totally a debt spiral. And no one had ever seen Luna go down more than like 20% until it all unraveled in a day, right? But you had this fanaticism around Luna and like, oh, this is such interesting mechanics. Plus this number go up, I'm going to become rich. And a lot of people did become rich at a time with Luna, right? And so you add those two components together, you get like this super fanaticism that is, I think, almost similar to like religious zealots. Because the only other place that has similar mechanics to that is kind of like religion, right? Where if my religion dominates, and I think you don't see this nowadays, but you see this if you look like 400 or 500 years ago, where I believe in this religion, I believe in this figure, and if I believe in him so much, we're going to dominate the world, and we're all going to become rich and like have whatever we want and all of that. And I think that's a similar circumstance to what you see in crypto. So anytime you see a cult figure, just run, like run far, far, far away. Like you see this with Do Kwon. I think you saw this with Danny Estes and like Wonderland and Time and all of that, like Frog Nation or whatever. Like that was a big one where people were like obsessed. They were like, oh my God, this guy built Spell. He built Wonderland. He built Ice and like Popsicle Finance and like these 3 or 4 applications. And people were like, this guy's a god and I'm going to buy these tokens and he's going to make me rich. So not only is I think he's a genius, but he's also going to make me filthy rich. And you put those two things together and it's a recipe for like really, really bad stuff, right? Or for people to get burned or for people to get defrauded and this guy to take a bunch of money like Danny, right? Like, I mean, I like the guy, I've talked to him a couple times, like he's a great guy. But like he also like does drive a Bugatti in Dubai that with like the license plate that says like Time, he didn't get that from like building an awesome project. He got that because he set up a Ponzi and took people's money, right? So same thing with FTX and same thing with Do Kwon and on and on. Every single cult figure you see in crypto. I mean, I don't think the 3 hour guys fall in that category. I actually have a little bit of an affinity for them because I don't think being bad at business or being bad at investing is necessarily the same thing as being a criminal. But SBF was definitely like both, right? Like bad at management. I mean, maybe there's a time where he was good at management, but he definitely took a bunch of money from people, and that's definitely criminal and wire fraud and all that kind of stuff. So
last question here on the trial specifically and your takes is, I'm curious what you think of it being called like a snitch fest and the fact that at this point, those who have taken the stand were basically all at one point, for the most part, SBF's best friends, colleagues, high up in the company, and have intimate details with him, like working with him, being friends with him. And they're basically all there, like pointing the finger and being like, this guy, it's him, he's a criminal. And most of them have, they have plea deals where if if they get out of this, they'll still probably do some jail time, but hopefully significantly reduced compared to SBF. What's your take on that part of it?
Yeah. I mean, it sucks for sure. Like, it's probably not a fun position to be in, but like like if you were to think about what were all the other outcomes, like I don't think there's actually like I don't think there's any other realistic outcome that could have happened, right? Like I think honestly, like I haven't dug in too much, but there's probably a world where like Gary Wang and Nishad Singh, like they were probably as culpable in some situations, maybe even more culpable than SBF. But everybody wants to take down this like the Messiah figure, right? That's like what everyone goes for. And so everything was going to fall on him. And like that's the risk of being head honcho, right? And like no one knew Nishad Singh's name before like November 6th or whatever. Like no one knew a single thing about the guy, right? But the guy did have like $1 billion, right? So it's like I think it's symptomatic of this like larger debate of like fame versus fortune, and like which would you rather have? And like a lot of people say like when you hit a certain amount of fortune, you don't want fame. Fame is like a hindrance, but also there's things that fame buys you that fortune doesn't. And so it's just this classic trade-off. And I think this is very symptomatic of the trade-off where SBF wanted fame more than fortune. And that's why he's going to go down for the longest time, because he wanted to be this Messiah figure. And the other guys wanted fortune, but not fame as much. And they're probably going to go down, but not as long, right? So I think everyone else is going to get nice plea deals, but everybody wants the big name. And if you think about it in like a judicial term, like in a judicial sense, like that's what they want too, is they want to take down the biggest name. Those prosecutors want to put their name on the map. They want to be the biggest, baddest prosecutors in the world that took down SBF and the largest fraud since Bernie Madoff, right? And so it's kind of like that's the trade-off you make, is that if you're the head honcho, you take on the risk of going down. I think that's what happened.
So Ishan, given that predictions is kind of your thing with the sports predictions and then the predictive tweet, how do you predict this trial is going to end? And then also, how do you predict that it's going to impact our industry kind of going forward? Or do you think we've already seen that impact with what unfolded in November? Or do you think that the result of the trial will have a lasting impact?
Yeah, I think crypto is a lot of dominoes, right? So I think like everything that happened to FTX was all a very, very, I mean, I would say all as a result, as a contagion effect of Luna, right? Mm-hmm. So you erase $60 billion of market cap in 3 days. That's like a Lehman size collapse, right? And you take that out of the industry and you put this massive hole there. Like things are going to happen. That's why, Three Arrows happened. That's why Celsius happened. And that's why FTX happened too. So I think a lot of it is contagion. But I think as far as like what's going to happen with the trial, like he's going to go down. Like he's going to go down for a lot of years, probably like, I mean, the only wrench that I find is that his family are like these amazing, like Stanford professor lawyers. And, I guess, I don't know, maybe I watch too much like true crime dramas and there's like maybe some like jury tampering going on in the background or something like that. And there's just going to have like a hung jury or something. But like, he's going to go down for a long time, probably for like the rest for a majority of our lives. And yeah, he's just going to be like this weird figure, like remember him, almost like Do Kwon, like I'll remember when he was a thing. And like, I mean, just as the industry as a whole, like industry is just going to keep moving. Like this is a behemoth that cannot be stopped. I don't care if you're the US government. I don't care if you're Gary Gensler. I don't care if you're like, president of the United States or president of China or whatever. Like this industry is too much of a behemoth that can't be stopped. It's like, so things are just going to keep churning on. Things are going to keep growing. Innovation is going to keep happening. And this is all like, I think if you really think about it and you blow up big picture and you think about everything that's happened in let's call it a 12-year, 13-year timeline from the birth of Bitcoin to now, and you really think about just these past 2 years and getting through $60 billion of Luna and $30 billion of FTX just going poof and the industry gone. And we're still chugging along the way we are. And Bitcoin is still like almost, $750 billion valuation or whatever, or market cap. And Ethereum is still hundreds of billions. This is a machine, and this is a machine that it cannot be stopped, which is why I get so much conviction in the industry. If you can live through this and you can get through this, there is nothing like the US government could like stop, kill stablecoins and kill USDC. Like then Tether's just going to get bigger. Like this is a fucking giant cockroach that just cannot be killed. So I guess that's my prediction, is like it's going to keep rolling and it's not stopping anytime soon.
Love it. We've been talking a lot about FTX and it's been lots of fun and it's very timely right now. I think will be a lot of interest here from listeners. But we're getting near the end of this. So I do want to shift gears just a little bit for a few extra questions here. Now, one of the things you've been tweeting about recently is crypto banking. And usually when you hear crypto and you hear banking, they're kind of like, butting heads. But can you tell us a little bit about crypto banking? What does that term mean? And is this something of the future?
Yeah, I think so generally I think self-custody is great. Like self-custody doesn't make sense for the 99% of people in the world, right? Like if you're, I don't know, like some kind of like fugitive or something like that actually has like something to hide, then like, yeah, you probably want like full self-custody, right? But like, and like, obviously there's a lot of other reasons why you're like a normal, good person and you have like, you're a regular person in society that you might want self-custody, right? But I think a portion of it is good. But I think for the 99%, you don't want self-custody, right? I think of self-custody as like cash in the mattress, right? You want to have a little cash in the mattress for when you need it on a rainy day, but you don't want to have your whole net worth in a cash under the mattress, right? It just doesn't make sense. And that's how I see self-custody. So I think over time, and I think Circle is kind of doing this model, and maybe they complete this model by probably buying a bank one day, and buying a bank charter. But I think the end game for banking is, so if you're bullish on DeFi like I am, and you think that there's no way banks are going to be able to compete with on-chain yields and people are going to just give you the pass-through rates, so you're going to be able to get 4 or 5% without the bank taking anything, then you don't need a bank for the services. You just need a bank vault, right? You just need a place to hold your money. And maybe instead of giving them all that yield, you have a 5% interest rate that you get from T-bills or something. And then they take like a 0.1% yearly fee of the money that you hold in there. So essentially the point is that the idea behind the crypto bank is that eventually we're not going to have these full service banking institutions. You're going to be able to access all of the financial applications you want through DeFi, and it's going to be super easy. Maybe there's front ends that make it easier, that take a slightly larger fee, but nothing like the way that banks take fees. And in exchange, you're going to get a crypto bank that just, think of it almost like a vault rather than a bank. It's going to be a bank in name, but it's going to be more like a vault that just holds your money. Think of like a Fireblocks and these custody solutions, Coinbase custody, things like that, where they're going to hold your money just so you don't lose it and it's insured. And you don't need the bank for the financial services. You're going to have permissionless open source access to the financial services, but you just need someone to hold the money for you, hold your life savings for you. And that's what a crypto bank is going to do. And that's a concept I'm really bullish on, that I think Circle probably is going to do it. I think Coinbase / Circle is probably going to do something like that, where they're just going to hold your money there. And that's it. They're not going to lend it out. They're not going to rehypothecate it. They're not going to, or there's going to be like some kind of opt-in service where, hey, we're going to hold the money here. It's going to be in short-term T-bills, and you're going to get whatever the short-term T-bill rate is minus like 0.1% for our fee. Or, you can opt into this higher interest rate environment where we're going to rehypothecate a little bit. We're going to lend it out, things like that, right? And I think that's what the future looks like.
I love the concept, honestly, because it's not something that everyone has to do. It's an opt-in. There is some benefit and some upside. Like, for example, if it is all insured, well, that sure would be nice, because that's not the case with most DeFi today. So, if you can just go through that intermediary, use their service and get the added benefits, for some people, probably a large portion of people, there could be huge upside there. I think one of the biggest things that I think about on that side is just the onboarding of non-crypto native people throughout the world. You think about the older generation who aren't as tech savvy and aren't as comfortable. They're still not comfortable to this day when you bring up, like, they're interested in investing and buying crypto from an investment standpoint, but then they ask, how do I do it? And you're like, oh, you got to download this app and you got to, hold your keys and stuff like that. And just like, okay, no, too much for me. But if you can go to your bank or, a brand name that you have trust with, and they can help you out with it, and they get you into their services, I could see that being huge from an on-ramp. And, that user experience side, that there's still, even though it's always getting better, there's still a very big wall up for a lot of people to enter the space.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more, right? Like the UX is still shit, right? Like, if I wanted to onboard like my mom, who like, learn English like maybe 10 years ago, right? Like, and having her, and I have to like, teach her how to like, save the passwords for her email, right? Like if I have to teach her how to like use a wallet and like save the seed phrase and like, oh, if you lose your phone, it's okay. You just have to have this like 24-word phrase. But if you lose that, then like your life savings is gone. She's going to be like, no, I'm okay with my Chase Bank, right? Like, and so we're never going to win that way. And so the way that we win is like improving UX, making it easier, making it simpler, making it safer, which is why like self-custody is awesome. I don't think like any type of self-custody, whether it's like MPC or like with account abstraction, the cool things I don't think any of that is the way it's going to be. You're going to have that kind of stuff for your day-to-day, right? Which is why I think like the eCash analogy is really great. Like you're going to have all the options to do the day-to-day, but most of it is going to be held in a bank. And anytime you want to pull it from the bank, you're going to be able to pull it from your bank to your hot wallet. And just like people lose their wallets, like people are going to lose their hot wallets, which is okay because most of your money is still held in a qualified custodian like Fireblocks, Coinbase. So, if anyone's watching and they're building a custody solution, hit me up, please. Like I will invest in your custody solution.
So looking into the future, next year is the Bitcoin halving. What do you see? Like I know predictions has kind of been the theme of this episode, but do you think we're going to do you buy into the 4-year cycle theory? What do you think are going to be some trends to keep an eye on in 2024?
So one thing with predictions is like never make a prediction when you don't have to, or when you don't have a ton of conviction, or you just don't feel like you have all the answers. And this is something like crypto has never seen a high interest rate environment. It's like kind of scary to think about, right? Like we've never been in anything except like really like a zero interest rate environment. Is there a percentage chance that maybe all of crypto is just a zero interest rate environment phenomenon? There's a non-zero chance of that, right? And that this whole industry has just been funded by non-zero rate interest rate environments, and that we've just raised all this VC money, and like, it's possible, right? And so crypto's great, like nothing can outlive macro. And so and I don't think macro is changing any time over the next 12 months. So I think happening is a great narrative. I'm not of this like it's already priced in like mindset. Like I think that's really hard to do. I don't think anyone can like price in something that's 6 months away, that no one knows what's really going to happen or what the world looks like in 6 months. Mm-hmm. But there's just so much macro stuff happening, even outside of interest rates. But like you have like, war stuff and all of that. And there's so many other implications that go into investing environments. And I don't think things will change until interest rates change, because it doesn't make any sense to invest in high risk assets when I can just sit back and get a safe 5% from the US government. But I think that one thing people don't talk about enough is like the government doesn't have enough money to keep doing 5% interest rates all day. Like they're just like the debt is already so high and the debt to GDP is already so insane that there's no way they can they need to keep the interest rates high, but I don't think they physically can, because I don't think they can keep up that level of debt they're going to accrue. So I just kind of see this culmination of like broken things in the financial system that's probably going to culminate in like it not breaking at some point, but a lot of people losing a lot of confidence in it, which adds to the crypto case. So as far as the question of like what I think is going to happen, I think it's going to be pretty bleak for like another 12 months. And then we're going to start seeing rate cuts. And then I think when we get to around like, I think it's going to be higher for longer. So I think like we'll probably stay around like 3 to 4% for a while. But I think even that's enough to like for people to take on risks. But as long as like the number that I keep an eye on is the Aave rate, which I think is like probably like the risk-free rate in crypto, if there is one, is like, I guess that or ETH staking. And as long as both of those things are lower than interest rates and T-bills, like I think it's going to be tough to convince anybody that they need to deploy a bunch of capital in this thing.
Ishan, this has been a fun conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, but we have a 3-question segment that we ask every guest of Show Me the Crypto. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf is going to ask you those questions.
Ishan, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. First question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh, okay. This is a good one. Kobe. It's hard to go outside of Kobe. He has he's just untouchable. Like he's like just the best at clapping back at people. He is like legitimately hysterical. And he's also very sharp and successful, right? So that's like kind of the holy trinity of like, and like never any scandals, never any shilled this shit coin or did this bad thing. It's always like he's done it very clean and above board, and like just has this like universal acceptance and like rate that I just don't think anyone has, and also hasn't screwed that up at all, which is like very hard. Like to make enough money doing it the right way, which is like just trading, investing, and holding and all of that, and to make enough money to like when you have that, like he's probably the most followed person in crypto, and the amount of money he could probably get thrown at him to like shill stuff or do stupid stuff or like invest in this shit coin or like dump this shit coin on his followers, like that, to make so much money that you wouldn't even consider doing stuff like that is honestly legitimately impressive, because I think there's like to have zero greed and be that successful is just super impressive. So I got a lot of respect for Kobe.
I think Vitalik is probably our number 1 pick, but Kobe may be our number 2 for that. Yeah. There's been a lot of people who've mentioned Kobe.
But I love your like explanation of why Kobe, because we don't normally get that. And that was like very eloquently put.
I mean, FTX did sponsor Up Only, but.
All right. Second question. We're getting back to prediction time, but this time we're going 10 years out. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Ooh, man, honestly, like I mentioned this at the very beginning, but like I'm honestly not even like a huge Bitcoin guy. Like I mean, obviously it's cool, and like I think ETF stuff is big. But like I guess I'm a little bearish after seeing like the VanEck ETF and like not having much volume there. But I think it's much easier to understand the value prop of Bitcoin than Ethereum and smart contracts. I also find I guess you can call it like kind of like I don't want to say cult, but like the people that are really into Bitcoin and like their tenacity to just continue to build, and like Taproot and Ordinals, and now they're like doing ZK stuff and stacks, and I think there's just so much stuff happening that it's hard to imagine a world where there's just like nothing going on Bitcoin, because I think people just like find it really interesting, and it's like the original digital asset, right? So if digital assets are huge, this is like the original one. I think that's a narrative in and of itself that's pretty powerful. So 10 years out, we're in 2023, 2033. I'd say like $500,000. I think $1 million Bitcoin is pretty crazy, because like you're talking about like almost like a quadrillion market cap. But I think like a $500,000 Bitcoin, which is like almost like a 20x from here, is pretty reasonable. I think in a decade, I think it's pretty reasonable.
I like it.
Yeah.
The math checks out.
Yeah. I love the detailed responses. A lot of thought going into these answers. I appreciate it.
All right. What's the most underrated project in the crypto space?
Underrated project. So I'm gonna show my bags a little bit. I'm just a big Gains fan. Gains Network. I talked about it a couple times here. I mean, that was like the first project that I core contributed to really heavily. But when I met Seb, who's the founder, who's like, he's super anon, like, I think anyone that looks at the architecture of Gains and how it's built out on like a architecture function is like really wowed by how well it's done and how well it's put together. I think it solves a big need in the market. I think derivatives are like massive in the industry. I think perpetual futures are something cool that's really only native to crypto. Like perpetual futures aren't a thing in TradFi. Like you have dated futures. And I think offering stocks, commodities against a single LP, like I don't love the GMX model. I don't like having like ETH, Bitcoin, and USDC. I think just having DAI is like cooler and better. More importantly, it's cooler because like we're like very decentralization maxis, right? And they're like, oh, they have USDC. Like, we don't really like USDC. We're just DAI. And having only that backing everything is super cool. And also, we just launched a big tokenomics change. So there's going to be even more revenue generated to GNS stakers. So like you have this native token, and this native token, not only is it deflationary where you have the DAI pool. When the DAI pool gets to 130%, anytime it goes above that, it takes a percentage of it and buys back GNS and burns it from the open market. So it has like this really awesome open market operation that buys back and burns the native token. But on top of that, you stake GNS and a little bit of alpha. But now that the tokenomics change is passed, you're probably getting like a 15-16% APR. So you're getting 15, 16% on your GNS. There's no inflation that happens on the token and only deflation that happens. And it's all legitimate yield source, which is trading revenue, right? Trading fees accrue, more people trade. The more that people lose, the more that the DAI pool gets over collateralized, which means more gets taken out from the DAI pool and used to buy back and burn GNS from the open market. And then on top of that, it also accrues trading fees itself. So it gets trading fees, positive, negative P&L for the DAI pool, which then comes back and buys back and burns. But then also a portion of the trading fees goes straight into GNS stakers. So it's a cool token that has, I think that's one, it's like this culmination of like what's really cool about DeFi, which is like this permissionless open market operations that happen. I think Frax does this really well too. They have a ton of AMOs, automated market operations, that help create these interesting revenue opportunities and like crypto native stuff that happens. These things can only happen in crypto, right? Mm-hmm. In a trustless, permissionless way. And then on top of that, you have like this token that, you know, has some number go up features that has an internal IRR. So you have internal IRR plus this deflationary mechanism. And I think and it's sustainable, right? Like gains have been going really strong, been doing this consistently for like over a year now. So like, it's pretty safe. It's pretty good. So I'm a little bit talking up my bags, but I'm a big fan of the project. So
I love it. It's a good explainer too of like some of the mechanics there, for those who probably aren't familiar.
Yeah, 100%. Ishan, this was a fun conversation, as I mentioned. Thank you so much for joining Alf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me anytime.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.